Momentum matters, the future unveiled. Momentum matters, the future unveiled.
Hello, and welcome to Momentum Matters, the podcast that delves into the latest and greatest matters, trends, and innovations shaping culture. Today, we're exploring the rise of AI deepfake music. In this episode, we will discuss if AI is an opportunity to revolutionize the music industry, or is it simply a threat? I am Glenn Minerley, SVP and head of Momentum's Talent Collective, and today I'm joined by Alan Snyder, Global CTO at Momentum. Our guest today is Peter DuCharme, Senior Music Engineer from Boomy. All right, so I guess I'm going to kick it off. I think the best way to kick this off and to start is to give a quick overview of how AI has been integrated into the music industry today. We'll talk a little bit about deepfake and how AI is just being used and integrated in general. So there's three ways that AI is being used in the music industry today, right? First one is generative AI. This is telling the AI engine, write me a love song about dogs in the spirit of Taylor Swift, or write me a children's song that sounds like NWA. That's generative AI, and that's what we all tend to understand AI as. But there's other ways AI is being used as well. One way is around inspiration, right? So a lot of artists with writer's block or don't know where to start are able to look to AI to get them started down a certain path. Give me a beat loop, give me some certain instruments and instrumentation that's put together to just get me inspired and get me going. And from there, I'll really build. And then the third way, which is interesting, is a restoration model where I think the best example is the Beatles. Last year, we were able to release a new song. It was a song that they had recorded, I guess, 40 years earlier. And it was back then, they didn't have the ability to do separation of tracks in the same way we have now. So they were able to use AI as stem separation, and it allowed AI to specifically work on John Lennon's voice and enhance it to meet modern day production standards. So those three ways, I think, are probably the most popular way AI is being used in music today. So Peter, let's start with you. In your opinion, does AI-generated music pose more of an opportunity or a threat to artists in the music industry as a whole?
I think generative AI music, whether it's a threat or it helps musicians, like both things will happen, right? As a tool, it's great because you can describe an idea, you can iterate over it, you can work with AI as a co-writer, and you could explore and develop. That's the good thing. I think that the bad thing that I was a little concerned about is like it's flooding all the digital service providers. Anyone can have a lazy prompt, hit a button, make a song, and put it on Spotify. You can do that all day long. So suddenly you just have, these services being filled with junk. But I think there's a sort of generation fatigue that I'm seeing, like a shelf life, especially if you look at AI images, you're starting to see all the images are starting to look the same, because they're not coming from a human choice. It's just sort of this generic thing. And I'm starting to hear that with music. One thing in my job is that if I work on an algorithm, I'll run it 3,000 times and compare the first 5 to the last 5 and see if there's anything different or not. So I think part of that noise is something that people will start to ignore. So the only real drawback is it's clouding up the avenues for people to enjoy music, but it is a very powerful tool. So good and bad.
I think there's value to people creating anything. And I am excited that anyone now can become a composer and publish to Spotify. And so all the things that Peter are worried about, I celebrate. And I think there's great value in this experimentation. I don't disagree at all with the idea that there's kind of this fatigue and there's this similarity. But also, I'd argue that Peter and Glenn and myself are really, really close to all of this. So we're able to notice that nuance. And I'm not sure people who are a little bit further away from it can't. And for me, authenticity is the real issue here. And I'm sure today we'll talk more about kind of some of the legislative aspects and kind of threats that this poses and the harm it can potentially do, certainly from a financial standpoint, but also from a cultural standpoint. And those things are of concern to me, but also in the same time, it's a question of evaluating what does this culture mean and what is the value of machine-generated culture, and who is it for, and what's the purpose of it? How do we use it? Do we use things that are made by machines in the same way that we use things that are generated by people? Do we acknowledge them in the same way? Should we acknowledge them in the same way? And should all these things kind of come with a warning label? I would argue that there needs to be transparency inside of any form of AI. I'd argue even more that we don't really have AI today. What we have is machine learning, and we have really, really, really good morph engines. And they're not even that great as morph engines, but they're the best we've had in human history so far. So they're doing a pretty good job. But my point is that there needs to be some sort of transparency attached to that, some way of knowing that a machine was involved in generating it, or a machine generated it in its entirety. And will that make me feel differently about this piece of music when I listen to it? Will that make me feel differently about the people purported to be associated with it? When I listen to it, maybe that'll mean I'll like it better. Maybe that'll mean I'll like it less. I don't know. But for me, that's where I sit inside.
Well, I'm not going to tap dance around my point of view. It's an absolute threat. It's garbage, and we need to kill all the robots. I'm super concerned. We started out before talking about 3 different ways that AI is integrated into the music industry. As it relates to restoration, I think it's really interesting, and I think it gives an opportunity for artists that are no longer with us or no longer able to perform at the same capacity to release music that humans created in the past in a way that's enhanced for modern society. I think that's fine. But when it comes back to generative AI, it's just yet another example of how the human community and public are just another way that we're not going to trust anything anymore. We don't know whether or not the song is real. Every time we hear something, we're going to question whether it was really that artist that sang it, if they're really even involved in the project. And I think that long-term and short-term, that's really detrimental to the commerce of music, but more importantly, the art of music. All right, Peter, how do you view the ethical implications of using AI to create music, especially when it comes to replicating the likeness and sound of actual artists without their consent?
Consent is so important. Like, anything you do without consent is just evil anyways. Like, you never hear of anyone be like, oh, don't worry about it, there's no consent. And I think that, recently the Randy Travis having a stroke about 11 years ago, yet he just released an album. And I think, Glenn, you just touched on this as well. That's kind of exciting. I mean, he's a wonderful musician. He's very talented, but with his team and with his publishing company, they were able to work out a system to use RVC, and he was able to release a record. And I think that's a nice example, but that was with Randy Travis working in conjunction with the technologist and his publishing. And I think that when you don't have consent, then that's just another kind of theft. So you should never pretend to do a fake Beyonce track by taking her voice and writing something and putting it out there and say it is. Initially, when AI was all super hot with audio, you had like the fake Oasis song from AIasis, I think they called it. They were very transparent. It was very funny. And even Liam Gallagher was like, oh, it's a great song. So everyone had a laugh, but no one thought it was Oasis. They were just sort of celebrating their sound and how AI got them to that point. But it should never be used for fake images, video, or music. And I don't know how you can ensure transparency with songs unless you have a whole new category. But it's a gray area to be sure.
I think it takes all of this exists on a spectrum. So the Randy Travis example is a great example, right? Because Randy provided consent and approved the project. What happens when you have a dead artist and the estate starts to do things where they start to use AI to enhance songs that hadn't been released before, and the artist is no longer living to decide whether he wanted that song released? What if Prince's estate or Michael Jackson's estate starts coming out with music that's in the vault that needs to be enhanced by AI because it was just a nugget or a germ of an idea, and now they've made it into a whole composition. Like, is that okay? Maybe. But, I think it all exists on a spectrum, and it's a bit of a slippery slope once we start doing it in one area. Where does it end?
Glenn, can I ask you a question? Because I totally agree with that. But that Anthony Bourdain documentary, Roadrunner, they took his writings, but they created him saying it using an RBC. So he's dead, but it's his estate. And it did help tell the story better, but it still feels a little weird to me. Like, I felt uncomfortable with it. What's your take on that?
I agree. I mean, sometimes you got to let things go, right? Like, everybody wanted that project to come to light. I get it. But at the same time, at what cost? I mean, it goes back to Star Wars and Princess Leia making an appearance when she was dead, right? When the actress was it transcends all of art. And I think it's an issue that we need to discuss and work through legally.
Yeah, I think it's really, really clear from a commercial perspective, or at least clearer, when it comes to consent. It's a fundamental human right? It's part of your autonomy and self-determination that, you have the ability to control how your image or your likeness or your voice, are used. And that's really, really clear, again, for commercial reasons. But when it's not commercial, I think that is very different. And I think that we have been given a new tool set that artists can use to create new transformative works that may add to our condition of being human in interesting and new ways. I agree fundamentally. If it's exploitative, no, right? If it's with not permission based, no, you can't do any of that. But I would not want to find us in a place where we should say, well, this is something we should never do, because it may in fact make us more human than less human.
I mentioned earlier, and I stand by this, that it comes down to a simple concern, and that's around public trust, right? I think, people are already distrust everything, right? So when it comes to art, it's one of the pure things that we still are like, oh, wow, this is beautiful because of the scarcity of it, and because this one person has a skill that nobody else has. If you start hearing music and you love the song, you're like, wow, that artist is so skilled and was powerful in the delivery, and I love this art because of that. Already you're seeing when art comes out, specifically music, people are instantly questioning whether it was that artist. Just this week, you had a track come out with a new artist from Toronto called Snow Day, and there was a feature by Drake. And everybody came out. Drake didn't say anything about it right away. Everybody came out and was like, this has got to be AI. Turned out that the track just sucked, right? And it was a really bad song, but everybody thought it was AI because it sucked so bad, right? Drake came out and was like, no, it's really me. But again, that concern is like out there, where 2, 3, 4 years ago, people would have instantly just said, that's Drake and the song sucks. But there's just comes down to that mistrust,
So there's an ongoing debate on the potential financial loss for human artists due to AI-generated music. How significant do you believe this impact could be? And are there ways to mitigate it?
I think that the financial loss is, just because it's very new right now, there's certainly a way to enumerate artists because it's data. You can track where the data came from and certainly compensate those musicians. I just think right now it's like you press a button, you get a song. Oh my God, the IP is gone. And I always think back to 1989. I used to work at these record store in Boston, and we got De La Soul's 3 Feet and High Rising and Beastie Boys' Paul's Boutique the same year, sampling all over it. And they're incredible records, absolutely amazing. And it was a very exciting time, but the music publishers were like, you're using other people's music. You can't do that. And they were able to work out a way with publishing so the original music could be compensated. And musicians who made recordings in the 70s were suddenly seeing paychecks again. So it can be worked out. It's just this partnership between the artist and the publishing. And like I said, you can track that data. So if you build a music model with certain artists, you can still see when their content's being generated and work with them towards it. But that requires a definite partnership as far as how it will work. I can't think of any other way it could possibly work.
So for me, I think that there's two pieces that are important that I'm not really seeing a whole lot today. One is educating artists so that they're aware of their rights and the legal and technological tools that are available to them. And it's a dynamic environment, right? It's changing. And like so many other things in our world, our technology has surpassed our legislation and our morality. And so, what do we do with it now? And artists need to understand, or we need to provide tools for artists to understand what their rights are inside of this. And the second part is that I really haven't seen in a really formalized way are advocacy groups for artists, so that they can collectively lobby for stronger protections and fair compensation as well inside of that. So I think that, education and advocacy are the two areas that really need to have a huge focus, because the legislation is going to take a very long time for it to make sense. And perhaps by the time it does, the technology will have changed to such a degree that it'll evolve past whatever boundaries we might create now.
I'll jump in on this one as well. I know for a fact the labels are scared to death of this, right? So, the labels have a lot of control of the Spotifys and the Apple Musics of the world. And I know that they're in, advanced conversations with these folks to figure out ways to prevent deep fakes and AI-generated music that is not sanctioned from living on those platforms. I'm pretty confident they'll figure that out very fast. Where the concern lies, though, is the speed of the internet, the speed of SoundCloud, the speed of TikTok. And if one of these deepfake songs gets out there, it can become viral very quick and could, negatively impact the artists, not just from a monetary standpoint for that individual track, but if the track is not that great, people can start to think, well, that was Drake, well, that was somebody else. And I no longer like that artist, even subconsciously, because that song was terrible. So they're super concerned about that and what the long-term impact is on artists' art and their integrity. But there's, another part of all of this that we haven't really addressed here which is the actual labels going in and using AI to create fake artists and to sell that. So that's not a financial concern, or from a legal standpoint. That's just a trust concern. Like, what do we think about a label like Sony Music signing a fake artist, Joey Rapper, to come up with unique songs that are generated by AI, marketed by the label, videos put out, all of that, just like a normal artist, but it's a fake artist. I think that's something that we're gonna see more of. We already saw it fail once with the labels last year, but I think that they're going to try again. And I'm interested to see what the general public responses to that. The use of image and sound likeness for commercials through AI has raised a lot of concerns. From a legal standpoint, what measures should be taken to protect the rights of artists?
So in the United States, the core legal framework that protects an artist's name and voice and in face is the right to publicity. And the right to publicity is pretty interesting because it acts as a legal bodyguard for those assets, name, voice, and face. And right now, there really isn't, beyond clear commercial violations, the rest of it's a big gray area. And that is the challenge. And I think that the argument would be we would need legislation to say if we think of an artist's work or an artist's face or an artist's voice as a box of Legos, and they might build a house or a car with those Legos. And if someone were to come along and make a dinosaur with it, right, that would be, what legally would be considered a transformative work. So that's taking something that exists, like a song or a painting or Legos, and changing it in a significant way that gives it any meaning or purpose. That's what, Peter was talking about with De La Soul or Beastie Boys, right? It's not just copying; it's building upon the original thing to create something fresh and different. And I think the idea of being able to embrace and celebrate transformative works and to elevate these tools to do that is critically important. While at the same time, we need to make it very, very, very clear that people's names, voices, and faces belong to them. And that is the legal challenge that needs to be navigated. Glenn, given your expertise in music talent management, how do you see brands effectively navigating the challenges and opportunities presented by AI deepfake technology in the music industry, especially in terms of protecting artists' rights and authenticity while also exploring innovative applications?
So we've spoken about this topic a lot, about the idea of how brands use AI, specifically in the music space. And it really comes down to two things. One is, are they using AI to create music for an above-the-line campaign? That's A. And the second one is, are they using AI as a way to create consumer engagement tools on the ground in an activation standpoint, right? So the second one is easy, right? Like, I think using AI as an engagement tool, we're already doing it with Coca-Cola and our music festival activations, where the consumer comes up to our music festival footprint and is able to use AI to create new sounds and new images and new album covers and things and music videos to make it look like they're a rock star. I think that's totally fine, and it is a great way to engage the consumer. But when you look at like above the line, it comes down to our core question here. It's about creating new music without having to pay a Drake or a Future or a Post Malone for their music and their contributions. And I really think that there could be a negative backlash long term from the consumer on that when they realize that that song was generated by a computer and not a real artist. All right, so looking forward, how do you see AI technology evolving within the music industry? And what innovations are you most excited about or even concerned by?
This is a really interesting question, because I think a lot of the immediate answer is we don't know, right? The second answer for me is this idea of hearable technology and using sound to augment reality in really new and innovative ways. So as we're kind of navigating kind of our physical reality for artists to take, the intersection of geospatial technologies and geospatial awareness and artificial intelligence and all of these really amazing, hearable, audio devices that we have, the headphones and the AirPods, and blending together work that's being composed with physical reality and being able to merge those things together based on ambient conditions in the environment, and to construct new pieces of work in that way that could even be custom tailored to me and my experience as I navigate the world. So if you think about that, those types of things don't, traditionally couldn't exist, and they couldn't exist certainly without the assistance of these technologies, both the hardware and the software, that enables that. So for me, I'm most excited about the kind of the intersection of work that can be bespoke and blended into aspects of my life and aspects of reality that, I wouldn't have expected it, and that my experience would be different than Glenn's. My experience would be different than Peter's. When we're all listening to the same artist, to the same song, my experience with it, my version of it, may not be consistent. So the ideas that we have of creating a composition that is locked into being one thing forever, to becoming something that's dynamic and unique for everyone, I think is a really cool opportunity.
I think what I'm seeing now is how AI is making tools and creative products even more effective. As a musician that writes myself, Logic Pro came out last week from Apple, and they started putting AI into their session player. So you can literally have musicians play parts. You outline the chords and describe the kind of part you wanted, and it will generate very convincing parts. And it's taking the monotony away from me trying to struggle through playing a piano part when it plays it great, but then I make a slight tweak and then I experiment and then I'll try something a little difficult that I wouldn't normally. So it's the subtle thing of improving tools that it's doing, I think, is the thing will catch on the strongest. And then there's probably an analog into video as well, or Photoshop and things like that. But I'm loving what it's doing to make the tools I use better. That's my immediate feel right now.
Well, I think AI is going to have a huge impact in the way we experience music live, going to a concert. I think we're a ways off, but you look at the Las Vegas sphere and the way that's changed the concert going experience. I'm really interested to see how people start to build on that and use AI to create a custom bespoke experience every night in a controlled environment, and what that visual, and not just going to be visual, I think it's going to be really like 4-dimensional, multiple dimensions involved, how AI can use different production tools to completely change that experience night in and night out. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for big time artists to use that in the future, to do like sit downs in Vegas, New York, London, Paris, etc. I also think negatively, AI is going to destroy the recording studio. I think that a lot of people who have made a living as engineers and just working around the recording environment are going to be made obsolete. We're already seeing it happen, but I think that's going to continue. Just what AI is going to be able to do is just completely replace their skill set.
But is that bad? Is that a bad thing, Glenn?
Well, look, I mean, yeah, it's bad. Those people are out of work, and a robot gets another job. But that there is a bit of evolution to that, right? And that happens in every industry. But the robots taking all our jobs is a whole other podcast that we'll wait for next week.
Excellent. Can't wait. Glenn, based on your experience in both music and technology, how do you envision the future relationship between human creativity and AI in creating music? What ideal scenario would you hope to see?
I alluded to it before. I think there's going to be a huge consumer backlash against this pretty quickly. I think it comes down to this idea, the core of why we like music and why we like art, and it's really about the scarcity of it. The fact that there's only a small percentage of humans that have super abilities to create art. Art is obviously subjective, right? But that being said, there's a small number of people that can do it. When robots start to be able to do it and crank out volumes and volumes and volumes of art that would otherwise take years for that small percentage of people to create, there's going to be a backlash against it because it's not going to be scarce anymore. So that's what I anticipate happening, and I think it's going to happen sooner than later.
I think, as this settles, we're going to start to see mediocre get more sophisticated. Like mediocre will be this level playing field, which is sort of like we as consumers will get attuned to it. And then the more creative human source stuff will still sparkle and stand out because it's coming from organic. Something that's interesting that Glenn had said about jobs, being replaced by AI. I've seen this with mix engineers where you can use AI to do final mixes and master mixes, and it's becoming cheaper because it's expensive to hire a proper engineer. So anyone can have a better sounding mix. That said, if you have a master engineer like Bob Ludwig, I'd rather have him do it than a cheap alternative because he's so good. He has so much experience, and his ears are coming from an organic decision-making process. So I think people that are good or people that strive to be good will stand out and they will peak above the fray. I think mediocre is just going to get a little more refined and a little more sophisticated, but as consumers, we're going to get used to that.
So for me, I believe that AI is a creative tool. It's not a replacement. And for me, the ideal scenario is that AI is not a threat to human creativity, but it's an ally, a really powerful ally. And it expands the possibilities of music creation and what the meaning of music. And I think that we have a future where humans and machines can work together to create music that's more diverse and expressive and more accessible than it has ever been before. The idea that we are replacing jobs with robots, and I guess we'll talk about that in the robot job replacement podcast. But is about automation taking over repetitive tasks, and complex tasks. But to Peter's point, it's really important that we are very careful about what we choose to abdicate control of to AI. And it's up to us. It's not up to the machines, right? So we don't need to close the recording studio, right? Like anything else, everybody's going to vote with their wallet. And if the industry decides to close the recording studios and they make garbage that no one wants to listen to, then the answer is going to be pretty clear. What'll happen if things go that way. And I think that even though this is AI and it's highly mechanized and we're talking about machines, ultimately it's in service of people, and we need to take control of the outcome because we have the control of the outcome. And it's not like this is happening to us. This is something that we are doing together. So that is the kind of point, I think.
Peter, thanks for joining us and helping us with this debate. You scare me, and everything you do scares me, but I love that you're here to help us, and looking forward to speaking with you again soon.
Peter, thank you so much for joining us today. I've known you for a very long time, and I appreciate everything that you have done to help evolve the music industry and to help to embrace robots in exciting and creative ways, because my love for robots is profound, almost as much as my love for you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into AI deepfake music and its implications for brand marketers. Until next time, thanks for listening.
Momentum matters, the future unveiled.